reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Ukraine has found thousands of foreign-made parts in a weekend Russian attack. President Volodymyr Zelensky says linking them to firms in the US, China, Taiwan, the UK, and other countries. France's newly appointed Prime Minister has unexpectedly resigned shortly after forming his cabinet, making it the shortest-lived government in modern French history and escalating the country's political crisis. The Trump administration is reportedly preparing to set the US refugee admissions cap at 7,500 this fiscal year, a record low that prioritizes white South Africans of Afrikaner ethnicity. Tanzanian opposition leader Tundu Lissu goes on trial for treason just weeks before the East African country holds an election from which his party is barred. And over 200 hikers remain stranded after an unusually heavy blizzard hit the eastern face of Mount Everest in Tibet, though many have been rescued over the weekend. Hello and welcome. Let's start with the protests in Morocco. The youth-led demonstrations in the North African nation have shown no signs of abating. Now, young Moroccans have been taking to the streets across several cities, including the capital of Rabat, Casablanca, and Tetouan, demanding health and education reforms. Protesters have been calling for an end to corruption and a change of government. Young Moroccans have demanded the Prime Minister's resignation and have rejected his calls for dialogue.
We are here simply to ask for better education, to also ask for better health for everyone in Morocco. And as a Moroccan citizen, I am saying that I am fully ready to fight for my country and work hard for better education and to have a better future as a citizen and for all Moroccans.
The protests that began on September the 27th turned deadly last week after police opened fire at a group reportedly tried to attack security forces and to steal their weapons. Now, authorities said that they opened fire in legitimate self-defense. The incident took place near Agadir and at least 3 people were killed. One of them was a 25-year-old student named Abdesamad Obella. Now, his funeral was held last week.
My brother, who went there to document the situation, worked as a photographer in a small hotel and owned expensive equipment. When chaos broke out, he kept his professional gear, a black magic camera, lighting equipment, and a stabilizer safe in a cafe. He only took a small camera with him.
The demonstrations have been marred by violent clashes, vandalism, and looting. However, the group leading the protests has distanced itself from such cases of violence and has urged protesters to remain peaceful. Young Moroccans have been seething with anger over the government's spending on preparations for the international sporting events like the 2030 FIFA World Cup, instead of investing in health and education sectors. Anger has also been mounting over unfulfilled promises of rebuilding homes of the survivors of the deadly 2023 earthquake.
We claim our rights to education and healthcare. These are rights, not privileges. We have no use for stadiums. And when you look at the residents of House, region hit by a deadly earthquake in 2023, who have still received nothing, but the stadium was built and completed quickly. In my village, near Tetouan, we have neither a hospital nor a pharmacy.
The latest demonstrations come after isolated protests that broke out last month in several cities after reports of the deaths of 8 pregnant women at the public hospital in Agadir, who had been admitted for cesarean sections. And amid the hue and cry over lack of healthcare facilities, the government has launched reconstruction of its outdated hospital in Agadir, which is over 60 years old. Speaking on the ongoing youth-led protests, the first vice president of Agadir City Council that the government must learn from the current situation and to accelerate these reforms.
We must learn from everything that has happened. How can we mobilize these young people and explain to them what is happening today and what obstacles exist? We must draw inspiration from their ideas to accelerate these reforms. We can say that there are high expectations for limited resources. In order to satisfy everyone's desires, a little patience and rationality are required, and Morocco, thank God, is doing much better.
The government has been trying to appease the young protesters with such steps, but the protests have not shown any sign of slowing down anytime soon. Now, for more on this, we have with us Samira Benis, a political analyst and co-founder of MWN, who is joining us live from Fez, Morocco. Welcome to Firstpost Africa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, how significant is the role of the Gen Z 212 collective and this online mobilization in sustaining these demonstrations? And what does it say about the changing nature of civic engagement in Morocco?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. I have seen a lot of misreporting about the protests in Morocco over the past week, with many saying that Moroccans are rejecting the fact that Morocco is hosting the World Cup or the African Cup of Nations. I think people who are making these statements are misreading what actually Moroccan youths are calling for. Moroccans, there is a unanimity among Moroccans that whether the World Cup or the African Cup of Nations are good for Morocco because they will accelerate the infrastructure programs that Morocco has embarked on over a decade ago. And we believe, and Moroccans believe, that what we can achieve in 5 years would take decades to achieve if we were not hosting the World Cup. Now, let me explain to you the background against which protests have taken place and what was the trigger that pushed Moroccans to go to the streets. For many years, many institutions within the Moroccan government itself have sounded alarm bell about the degrading situations of millions of Moroccans and have called on the government to take swift actions to address this situation. For example, there are 4 million Moroccans, who are young Moroccans from the Gen Z, who have no skills, no educations, and no employment. In addition to that, there are 40% of Moroccan youth have no employment. And this situation of Gen Z only mirrors the decline of the living conditions of millions of Moroccans who have seen how their purchasing power have declined in proportions never seen before because of the rampant inflation which has been made worse by the steep increase in gasoline prices. And the problem which made Moroccans more angry is the Prime Minister is the owner of the major oil company in the country, and despite the fact that the dollar and oil prices have dropped over the past year, there has been no reflection of this drop in gas stations. So the problem now is that the Moroccan youth and the Moroccan people in general are fed up with seeing an elite of corrupt officials who have been running a country in a way that does not prioritize the public good, but only their own self-serving agenda.
Right, Samir. Now, do you think that the government's quick response in beginning the renovations at Agadir's Hassan II hospital will in any way help to ease that public anger? Or is this being viewed as a token gesture amid those deeper systemic issues that you spoke of?
Well, I do think that the states, the states, as opposed to the government, like the deep states, has handled the situation in a very wise and smart way. Because now, unlike what happens in other Arab countries, Moroccans now are given the opportunity to express themselves on Moroccan state television. That means that the state has taken note of what's happening and is putting pressure on the government to take swift action or resign. What I believe will happen is that as the pressure on the government will increase, and since there is no sign that protests will abate or that Gen Z will drop their demands, and then I think the most likely scenario that will happen is that this government will be pushed to resign because Moroccans have been fed up with seeing the same faces that have been leading liberal policies that have extremely diminished their purchasing power and pushed millions of Moroccans deeper into poverty. What I believe will happen, and what I wish should happen, is that the parliament should take swift action to present a motion of censure against the current government, because there is Article 76 of the Moroccan Constitution provides for the government to submit a motion of censure to overthrow the government. However, what is needed is that for this motion to be received and presented for debate, it should have a quorum of 25%.
Right.
Then, in the next phase, it will need absolute majority to be voted. And in the case this happens, and I believe this is where things are heading, the current government will be overthrown.
Right. Samir, thank you very much for being with us on First Post Africa.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And shifting focus now to Somalia, where the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab terrorist group has carried out yet another suicide attack. Somali forces have killed 7 Al-Shabaab fighters who stormed a high-security prison on Saturday, which is holding some of the group's members. The attack took place at the Gadka Jilakau facility in Mogadishu, near the presidential palace. The facility regularly houses Al-Shabaab terrorists awaiting trial. According to the government, the assault began with a car bomb explosion, followed by heavy gunfire and additional explosions. It resulted in a 6-hour siege.
The neighboring houses, built of corrugated iron, were destroyed in the attack. Many residents have begun rebuilding their homes. As soon as the attack began, most residents fled, but fortunately, they have now returned.
Al-Shabaab later claimed responsibility, saying the attack aimed to free all the Muslim prisoners held at the facility. However, the government confirms no prisoners escaped. Security forces ended the attack by neutralizing all 7 gunmen. The government has not disclosed whether any of its personnel were killed. The attack is a major blow to Somalia's national intelligence. It is likely to raise questions about how the terrorists accessed one of the capital's most heavily guarded areas. Hours before the assault, the government had reopened key roads in Mogadishu, citing improvements in security. But the incident highlights the worsening situation in Somalia, despite the years-long efforts to end the Al-Shabaab insurgency. Now, Al-Shabaab is an Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group. It seeks to overthrow the Somali government and wants to establish an Islamic state. The group has a stronghold in southern Somalia, and thousands have been killed in decades of attacks in the country. In years of fighting, Somalia has made progress against the group with varying success, but the situation has deteriorated significantly this year. Al-Shabaab has seized control of dozens of towns and villages, undoing much of the government's recent military gains. The United States has been heavily involved in supporting Somalia's fight against Al-Shabaab. It conducts regular drone and air strikes, targeting leaders, training camps, and logistics hubs. The group is considered by the US as the largest, wealthiest, and most lethal Al-Qaeda-affiliated organization globally. Regional nations also play a key role. Countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda contribute troops as a part of the African Union peacekeeping mission. But even with a new AU mission operational since January, the threats persist. Al-Shabaab continues to gain momentum despite the ongoing counter-terrorism efforts. The group has shown tactical flexibility, focusing on asymmetric warfare, including ambushes, suicide bombings, and targeted attacks on military installations. These highlight the urgent need for strengthened security measures. And moving on, diplomatic tensions between Egypt and Ethiopia have escalated over a mega dam on the Nile River. Egypt claims that Ethiopia's actions on the Nile have triggered flooding in Sudan. This as it accuses Addis Ababa of opening the gates of the mega dam it inaugurated last month. Ethiopia has dismissed the allegations as false. Cairo accuses Addis Ababa of reckless and irresponsible management of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or the GERD. Now, it is Africa's largest hydroelectric project on the Nile River. After over a decade of construction, Ethiopia officially launched the $5 billion mega dam last month. This despite the continued objections from the downstream nations, Egypt and Sudan. The dam can transform Ethiopia into a regional power hub, supplying electricity domestically and exporting the surplus. However, downstream nations, particularly Egypt, have spent over a decade criticizing the dam. Cairo calls it an existential threat that could dry up the Nile, which is its primary source of water, providing 97% of its freshwater needs. Last week, Egypt said that the dam had released enormous quantities of water immediately after the inauguration, resulting in the flooding of agricultural lands and submersion of villages in Sudan. Egypt called the dam illegal and blamed Ethiopia for reckless, unilateral measures. Egyptian authorities have also activated emergency protocols. The Prime Minister warned that the water levels may continue to rise through October, threatening the northern governorates. Local authorities have already ordered evacuations of riverside homes. Now, Ethiopia responded to Egypt's allegations, calling them false and defamatory, and an attempt to mislead the international community. Addis Ababa says flooding in Sudan is due to the White Nile tributaries' rising water levels and has nothing to do with Ethiopia. Repeated assurances by Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed that the dam will not harm other Nile Basin countries, and his description of it as a shared opportunity, have failed to convince the downstream neighbors. Several international efforts have been made to mediate the issue, but none have succeeded. US President Donald Trump has publicly claimed to have mediated the dispute as he demanded a Nobel Prize. However, there are no signs of a resolution, and Ethiopia has rejected outside interference. Now, the dispute has evolved into a broader regional rivalry as Egypt has sided with other countries in Africa that are at odds with Ethiopia. It has supported Somalia in a port dispute with Ethiopia, so the issue seems to be growing in scale following the inauguration of the dam, with diplomatic tensions showing no signs of easing. And for the last story today, let's turn our attention to Malawi. Peter Mutharika has been sworn in as the country's new president after making a historic comeback at the age of 85. Mutharika defeated his longtime rival and outgoing president Lazarus Chakwera in the 16th of September election. Mutharika's swearing-in ceremony was held on the 4th of October in the country's commercial capital of Blantyre. Now, thousands clad in Mutharika's Democratic Progressive Party's traditional blue and white colors packed the Kamuzu Stadium to witness the swearing-in. During his swearing-in ceremony, Mutharika made big promises. He vowed to root out corruption and to rebuild the ailing economy.
I find you looting the government, whether you're a politician or a civil servant or a businessman, you are done. You are now dealing with a different president. And you're looking at a different president.
In his inaugural address, Mutharika said that his administration was inheriting a country in economic crisis.
Malawi is in the middle of a crisis. There is no food, there is no forex, there is fuel shortage, and the cost of living is unnecessarily high. There is no money in the government. Borrowing is extremely high, and nobody knows where the borrowed money went.
And taking a dig at the country's outgoing president, Chakwera, Mutharika said that Malawi's crisis was man-made.
Malawi's crisis is a man-made crisis. Our situation is not natural. Tragedy beyond our human capacity to solve it. Our situation is not a natural condition, but a problem created by humans can be resolved by humans also.
Malawi's new president also appealed to the international community to invest in the country. In his speech, Mutharika also addressed US President Donald Trump, saying that he would soon send a delegation to the US to discuss Malawi's prospects, especially after cuts in US foreign aid. This is the second time that Mutharika has become Malawi's president. He previously served as the president from 2014 to 2020. In 2019, Mutharika's victory over Chakwera was nullified on tampering charges. In 2020, Chakwera won the return. And Chakwera's presidency has been infamous for high inflation and critical shortages of fuel and sugar, long queues at gas stations, and putting daily food items like corn out of reach for many people. Malawi is already one of Africa's least developed countries. The country, which is heavily reliant on agriculture, has also been hit by the recent climate shocks, including a devastating cyclone in 2023 and a drought last year that destroyed crops. All of these factors have fueled public discontent and have led to Chakwera's defeat in the latest elections. And now Mutharika is back in power. He has vowed to fix the country grappling with an economic crisis. President Mutharika has pledged to target corruption, saying the honeymoon of looting government is over. During his first term, Mutharika brought inflation down to single digits. Will he be able to revive Malawi's economy and undo the damage done during Chakwera's presidency? Now that remains to be seen. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to Firstpost.